So I'm Danielle Condry, and I'm from the Department of Microbiological Sciences over in the College of Ag. And this is one of my lovely grad students, Kaylee Weigel, and student body president, and all kinds of other titles that she carries. And we're going to talk to you about do I belong here? Building inclusive programs that support student success and improve retention using Microsoft Teams. Our goals for today is for participants to be able to define retention. Participants will be able to identify factors that influence retention. Participants will be able to articulate how Microsoft Teams can provide structure to enhance retention in a program. And participants will be able to refer to our example in microbiology to maybe think about developing something like this and using Teams in their own program. I'm going to turn it over.
Yeah, this is really exciting for me because this is my whole thesis focus. So I'm very excited to speak with you all today about this. The first thing we're going to start with is defining retention. And instead of me telling you, you guys get to discuss amongst yourselves. So I'm going to give you about a minute, 2 minutes, something like that. Talk to the people next to you and talk about how you define retention. Notice that this is different from attrition. So keep that in mind when you're talking about how you define retention. This can be like within your own scope or within the university in general. And considering that this is the end of the session, you guys might know the answer to this, which is exciting. So take a minute to discuss amongst yourselves.
And if you're on Zoom, you're welcome to post in the chat.
Okay, I'm gonna pull you guys back to wrap up your conversation. I'm gonna do my favorite faculty trick. You guys get to share now. This is so exciting. Who wants to share what they or their partner talked about? And I will call on you like a good faculty member would. So somebody has to share. Yes, carry on.
So we talked about it as sort of staying in school, or if you're starting at NDSU, getting the degree at the end. And then we were also at the end talking about whether there's a difference between persistence and retention, and which word puts more of the onus on us as an institution and which word puts more of it on students.
Ooh, I like that. That's very good. Any other thoughts?
We've talked about the difference between retention within the university versus in a college versus in a program or a major and your class. So like there are times where it's okay if a student leaves your class because they realized that this is not for me, and that is okay, right? Because they're figuring it out, and that's what college is all about. But you know, we want them to stay at NDSU, right? So, and there are times where they might be not retaining in your program, and that is a red flag, right? So, it's not all as simple as numbers.
Right.
So we've got on Zoom Ann Kelch of UND says keeping students enrolled in the most basic idea, but hopefully it includes assuring they are successful.
Awesome. Any other?
I think from our discussions, I'd sum it up as creating the best opportunity for students to succeed. That's how, because if a student doesn't succeed in your area here, having them go somewhere else and succeed, that means we didn't do a good job in retaining them.
That's good. I like that. Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. So when I'm kind of thinking about this in the lens of my thesis, what I kind of focused on was keeping. So whether that's keeping students within your specific university, within a specific program, in a specific college, it's keeping the students there. This is really important, and I'm sure that you guys probably all have an individual answer to this because you're all at the seminar today. But I want you to think about why is retention important to you individually and how that can differ from the scope of my thesis project, but how it can be applied across different disciplines. I'm not going to tell you that because it's probably individual for all of you, but I want you to think about it as we're going through our presentation today. So when we talk about the outcomes of retention, we're going to kind of work this backwards. And when I started my thesis, when I was kind of combing through the literature, I boiled down the outcomes of retention into these things that I call self-centeredness. This isn't necessarily like being selfish or thinking of just yourself instead of other people. It's things like a sense of belonging. So if you are being retained, your answer to this is most likely yes, I feel like I belong here, whether that's in your program, in your discipline, at your specific university, which is really evident in our student population. The second is self-efficacy, which was kind of touched on before. Can I be successful here? And it's not whether or not you think that you are a successful individual, it's whether or not where you are has the resources and the accessibility to make you successful. And finally, it's satisfaction. If you're being retained, your answer to this is yes, you're happy here. That's why you're staying here. This was a paper that I thought was really interesting because it wasn't necessarily it wasn't a experimental study, but They did this model of a sense of belonging as some sort, they called it social retention and social belonging. So they surveyed a bunch of students to gauge how well they felt like they belonged at their specific university. And then they gauged whether or not they were actually retained at the end of the year without any intervention at all. What they found was that students who felt that they had a high sense of belonging within their social group, not academically, within their social group, so on campus, in their department, within their peers, they had a high sense of belonging, they were almost 100% retained. But if they had a low sense of social belonging, their retention, while 84% is still good, it's a 14% difference from those who had a high sense of belonging. And so this kind of gives us a good model to focus on, is this shows that that outcome of retention and that sense of belongingness really kind of plays into whether or not students are actually retained within their specific university system. So then when we talk about resources for retention, the first thing that we're going to talk about is support for students specifically, but this can apply across all disciplines. So I'm going to focus more on the student population, which is something interesting for faculty members to think about because you guys kind of have a key hand in retaining students as well, but this can be applied within your own department, within your faculty members as peers as well. But when we talk about support, the first thing we're going to focus on is mentorship. This is a really, really big factor of retention and one of the bigger focuses of my thesis. There's kind of three reasons why mentorship is important, and these are in general to kind of encompass all different disciplines we're talking about. But the first is that it enhances the overall experience. The second is that it improves outcomes and productivity. And then finally, you're able to establish a community and a network within your mentoring group. When we talk about different types of mentoring, the one that you're probably most familiar with is this hierarchical or dyadic mentoring. And so this is one mentor mentoring multiple different individuals. So this would be seen in like a common classroom with one professor mentoring a bunch of different students. There's also cyclic, which is considered peer-to-peer mentoring. And so this would be the students within your classroom mentoring each other, whether that's in study groups, within coursework, within the classroom setting. It's working with the peers around you. And then finally, a newer model of mentoring is the network mentoring system. And this is when you have one mentee with multiple different mentors. This can be bidirectional or just one direction, but this is having multiple different mentors. And literature has supported that actually a cyclic or a network mentoring setup is more beneficial than the hierarchical one because you're able to have multiple mentors with different disciplines and skill sets so that the mentee is gaining more knowledge and more likely to be successful, which is something that we're focusing on in our department. When we talk about the student mentoring impacts on retention and success specifically, if you have increased mentor opportunities, it increases retention because it increases personal and professional growth, whether that's in or outside the classroom. You get to establish that community of peers. You have an increased confidence because you're more likely to ask questions and be less afraid of failure. And then therefore you have a better performance in academics and research because you're more likely to pose questions or pitfalls that you're having and then be able to work through them with other individuals instead of having to try and figure it out yourself. The second, when we're talking about a university system to support retention, is resources available to students. And we talk about this in the lens of retention, we're focusing on professional development opportunities. This can be within your mentoring group or outside of your mentoring group, and it can be interdepartmental or within one specific department. Additionally, having regular communication is really important, whether that's within your peers or with your specific professor in a classroom or with the people that are around you in a specific department. And one thing I want to draw your attention to is affirmative versus negative language. This is really important, specifically when you're talking about speaking to students in your classroom. If you are having and using affirmative language and trying to build the confidence, someone comes up with something that's wrong and you say, you know, that's not necessarily the right track. Let's think of it this way, as opposed to negative language saying, no, that's wrong, you're wrong. You're more likely to tear the student down with negative language. They're less likely to be retained. If you're using affirmative language, you're building their confidence, you're decreasing their amount of fear for sharing their opinions, and they're more likely to be retained. Additionally, having networking opportunities, and this can be at conferences or interdepartmental, and this sometimes spans outside of the classroom if you have students that are working in a specific research lab or maybe just on campus in general. Community building, like I said, that can be bidirectional. This can also be social or professional, depends on the lens and the setting that you're looking at. Additionally, having established routines and check-ins is helping to build that accountability with that individual. And then finally, providing feedback. And this kind of goes back to the affirmative versus negative language. If as what we're talking about in this sense of like in a laboratory group, since Danny's my PI, if she's not giving me feedback on how well I'm doing on my thesis, I might go in a completely wrong direction and I won't defend this successfully. But if she's giving me feedback saying, you know, this is kind of a good idea, but probably not supported by literature, let's think about this, I'm more likely to be successful. And that helps kind of build that relationship even stronger. And that's why I'm retained at this university. I'm gonna pass it back to Danny now to talk about our specific example within our department.
Okay, so this is what we're doing in our department. And when we started to think about retention in our department, and we know, like, we're watching our numbers and it's scary. And we look at, you know, students, you know, looking for those kind of troubleshooting areas. And I think everybody knows this. We don't have a whole lot of time. And so it's like retention is really important, but where do I fit that in with everything else that I'm doing? And so my role in our department, I'm the graduate director and kind of I'm chair of the undergrad committee. And so I kind of have my pulse on all the stuff that's going on. And I'm like, okay, we need to do something, but I have a limited amount of time. What can we do? And so what we rolled out with is utilizing teams to facilitate a lot of those pieces that Kaylee was talking about for providing support and community with our students. We rolled this out with our graduate students, trying to think when I started this, last spring. So it's been about a year that we've had teams set up. With our undergrad program, we started that December, I believe, is when we set up teams for our undergrad group. And so this is very new. We don't have a whole lot of data to share with you yet, but we can, we'll let you know what we're collecting at this point. So Teams is something we all have access to through Microsoft 365. If you're not familiar with it, it can be a wonderful tool, as we're finding out. So how we're utilizing Teams is we're utilizing it to establish community. This is in a virtual environment. Our grad program right now is our grad students aren't all housed in the same room. They're in different labs, they're in different offices. And obviously our undergrad community, there's not usually a communal space where all of our undergrads are on a regular basis, unless they're in our student organization. So we're establishing that sense of community in a virtual environment. We also utilize Teams as a resource hub. So we're posting all kinds of resources that are available. I know Student Success Center sends out, things that come out like each month to, hey, this is something to keep in mind. So the students will get that in their email, but then we reinforce that and put it on Teams and say, hey, this is really useful and here's why. Those kind of pieces. As well as like things that are going on campus. We'll be like, hey, this is an opportunity. Here's the career, fairs going on at this time. Check this out for more resources on getting your resume ready. Those kind of pieces. We've also got informal mentorship set up on these sites. So we have, particularly for our undergrad group, I have planted graduate students in our undergrad teams who are graduates of our bachelor program. And so they've already navigated all those classes and were successful through our program. And so when our undergrads pop in, and Kaylee is one of those students who's populated on there, when they have questions about really struggling in biochemistry this semester, does anybody have any good resources? We've got students who've already been there and they can provide this kind of resources and mentorship through them. Opportunities for professional development, that kind of links in with those resources, but whenever there are opportunities, like our professional organization has webinars or workshops or things, I will drop those in there so students are aware of those kind of opportunities for professional development. Also networking opportunities, so connecting them with that national network as well as the network that we can have within our own department. And sometimes those networking opportunities leads to things like, oh, hey, we're all in organic chem this semester. Can we form a study group that is going to support, we know our students struggle in chemistry. And so encouraging those study groups to form and networking those kind of things in that space, as well as job opportunities. So especially for our graduates, our seniors, as well as our graduate students, I get contacted by organizations all the time out in industry that say, hey, I'm looking for somebody. We've hired somebody from your program before. Can you post this ad for us? And we make sure that on Teams, all those ads are going up so that our students are seeing those job opportunities. And I'm happy to report all of our seniors, not counting you because you're in grad school, all of our seniors have a job or are accepted to a professional program. And a number of those were off of job opportunities that we had posted on Teams. So this is an example of what our team site looks like. So this is our MS graduate students. We've got channels built up on here. So depending on what you're posting is what channel it would go in. General, there's all kinds of random things that get posted here. So this particular post in the middle, I know it's too small for you to read, but I'm going to recap. This is me going, hey, if you're signing up for summer tuition, summer credits, you need to do your summer tuition waiver so that those credits will be paid for. And anybody has questions, there's a bunch of replies there. They needed a certain number to report on that form. And so we added that in, but this is a running stream that you're not searching for that email. You're just going to that stream and you can see all those posts between all those different people. This is another student of ours who is looking for hiking spots for the summer. And so she posted that question and everybody's chiming in with those kind of things. Normally this kind of stuff would go in our social things network, but she posted it there. FAQs are a space where I use common questions that our students have. And then whenever students have a question, they're like, oh, I think somebody had posted about this. They can go back to this channel and go through those FAQs. Our grad student organization has its own channel. We've got opportunities. Those are professional development opportunities or job opportunities get posted there. Outreach projects. So within our program, we have an emphasis on community engagement. And so we organize outreach projects. So we've got things like Plant the Moon. We've got participation in Avenues of Scientific Discovery, Darwin Days, all those kind of opportunities. That's where they organize, can post their things and get together and plan what they're doing. Social things is turned into a very fun thing to see with our grad program, because I'm not facilitating it, the students are. And that got going, you guys, okay, it's Tuesday nights is bingo. And so they coordinate on there, and if students don't have cars, they like say, hey, this is the time I'm leaving Van Ness, come with me and I'll give you a ride. And all kinds of little like social things, as well as the Thanksgiving kind of piece was organized through that.
Our
And so
Saturday morning writing blocks also.
that's the hidden channel.
Oh, sorry.
So it wouldn't let me do that. But our hidden channel is our graduate student writing group. And so they've coordinated that every Saturday morning they meet at a coffee shop. And what has happened is I started this, and now the graduate students are taking it over and posting and running things. And it's been wonderful to see. Our undergraduate page, we have 3 advisors in our program. We advise all of the students in our undergraduate programs, biotechnology and microbiology. And so we have channels in there that we can post specifically to our advisees and coordinate like, hey, come and see me. It's time to start signing up for classes. We've got that central site, or if somebody's got a question, then I can answer it. And it's a question that everybody else can see the answer to as well when it's like a general question. Our undergraduate microbiology and biotech and microbiology club have space on there, as well as the officers have a special channel for organization. We've got our chat with a grad student. So if they're thinking they're interested in graduate school, they can post questions in there. And again, I've got grad students embedded there. Opportunities, same professional opportunities, our job opportunities. Social has not taken off with undergrad yet, but we're only 6 months in. So hopefully that'll be something we can build on. We've got a channel for study groups and study help. And we've also got this channel that is all our advisors and our department head, so that when we have a student that we're concerned about, we can chat in that space. No, none of the students see that. It's just our advising team. And then we can kind of encircle that student with assistance and all be aware of what's going on. So my caveats to this. So when you are using Teams, making sure that you at whatever the channel, so at general or at opportunities, that sends a notification out to everyone in that channel, as well as an email that, hey, people are trying to reach you in Teams. And so that people see that there's something to engage with. Email notifications initially for some people were going to the other inbox. And so they weren't seeing that people were trying to engage with them on Teams. And so getting people orientated to Teams was very critical. And not everyone is going to engage in this virtual environment. It's just kind of the nature of some people are like, I don't want to deal with online stuff, or they're like off social media and all kinds of stuff. So We are doing research on this, and so Teams actually has engagement data that you can pull, so I can see how many students were engaging with different posts at different timeframes, different parts of the semester, all those kind of things. We've also added elements to look at retention, so we've got an alumni survey, looking at what's beneficial from our program several years out. We've got an exit survey that looks at immediate graduates and how they feel, because we know that our immediate graduates feel differently about the program than they do 5 or 10 years out, when they start to see what was most beneficial. And then Power BI, you've got all kind of aggregate program specific data that we can look at retention. What we are Kaylee's going to be looking at is utilizing a climate survey for our students and faculty, and starting to kind of reprocess what success is for our students and what they're valuing versus what our faculty define as success and value, to make sure those are jiving, so that the students are defining success differently. That might not mean we're going to retain them, because what we think is success is not the same. We're going to hopefully increase our team's participation, especially in our undergraduate cohort. The graduate cohort is doing pretty well. But looking at how we increase that participation, I'm going to link that down to here, is we're going to hopefully integrate Teams into our 189 class for our freshmen, as well as some keystone classes throughout our undergraduate curriculum. And then with our graduate students, we have an intro class 701 that we're going to integrate Teams into that as well, so that they get orientated on how to use it, get used to using it, and are more likely to use it. And then Kaylee's going to work on a systems map analysis of our academic community and how Teams can be leveraged to interact with that community. So I think our summary is, supportive resources and mentorship opportunities lead to those self-centeredness outcomes, and that these general retention practices can be facilitated with low effort. I don't spend a whole lot of time on Teams, but it's having an impact, appears to have an impact. We'll have research hopefully on this next year for you all. But we're hoping that future research provides some contextual evidence and strategies for more implementation. So we're happy to take questions.
Yeah, so how do you go and, for like you said, the faculty, they have only access to that channel versus opening up, undergrads have questions for the graduate students. Did you enter all the names that you wanted onto that?
That is probably the most time intensive part.
Okay.
Is that, and honestly, our administrative assistant is helping me with that. But yes, so we get our list of students at the beginning of the semester. We make sure, because students, change majors, or we get new graduate students coming in. We'll go through and make sure everybody's name is on the list. With our specific undergrad advisee channels, I go through and make sure, the names are on there. And then remove the names of students who leave, which added bonus is then I follow up with them with our exit survey and find out, why they chose to leave, where they're going, which program did they switch to, and those kind of things. And so we get some exit data from our students who are not just graduates.
Then a follow-up, how do you get the emails of then you request the emails of graduates so that when they leave, you can do that later on survey, or how do you?
We work with the Alumni Foundation.
Okay.
And we circulate our surveys with the Alumni Association. So, and we've had tremendous, I think we got 60 responses to our alumni. Yeah, 63 responses. So and all the way, people that graduated, 25, 30 years ago, all the way to about 5 years ago. So they're really fantastic to work with for these things. Yeah.
How mobile friendly is Teams for students who want to access it that way?
I actually prefer to use Teams on my phone. The notifications are cleaner. It runs kind of like social media. And you just have this running chat going on. And so that's my preference. Now, if you ask Tom in our department, who's nearing retirement, he prefers Teams on his desktop and has taken a little bit of orientation, and he's not on social media or any of those kind of platforms. So he's taken a little bit more orientation to it, but he sees the value and is taking time to do it. So, because we're getting responses from students and getting them those resources, so.
Plus, once you set it up on your phone, you get push notifications, which I really like because I also use it on my computer because I'm usually like working with files and things. But I get a notification on either my watch or my phone. And it's like, oh, Danielle's trying to talk to you. I'm like, oh, shoot. And I pop it open and I like start doing work. So that way, because I'm always on my phone because I'm Gen Z. So I always get notifications. I see
Population.
it works really well. Yeah.
Yeah, just to contextualize, what's the size of your program? Like, what is the size of your graduate program and what is the size of your undergraduate program?
So our undergraduate program. So we just shifted biotechnology into our advising load. I believe it's around 70 to 80 students between both of those programs. And then our graduate program is 32. So,
Have you, sorry for follow-up.
yeah.
Have you peeked at any of the data, like of all of those undergrads? How many were on teams this last 6 months?
Okay, 50.
I know, you don't have to answer.
It's 50.
Okay.
So
That's why we're gonna work it into 189, so they know that it's there and they get used to it for a full semester. And that way they'll be more likely to utilize it for 4 years.
because we've noticed in our 189 class, we incorporated using like degree map. And then our students, as they come up, they've already got their whole plan laid out and they've already played with it ahead of their advising appointments. And it makes advising go so much smoother because we've integrated that into 189. They're familiar, they know how to use it. So we're hoping same thing happens with
How
teams.
did you introduce this to the undergrads? How did you introduce?
The degree map.
No, teams.
Teams, so they were all added. We sent welcome emails and we sent out kind of an email that this is a platform for them to use and build community and that kind of thing. So we also tried to talk about it in our advising appointments. It's hit and miss on how many of our students actually come to their advising appointments. So again, if we incorporate into our classes, we're hoping to have a greater impact.
So it's more informal, but you want to be more formal.
Yes, yes. Do we have any questions online?
And then you said this gives you the ability to do some retention data collection?
Yes, so we are taking our Power BI as well as like, I mean, we can keep track of when, if we look at semester by semester, who's being retained, who's graduating, those kind of pieces. We're keeping track of all of that. And then we can look at, okay, did this student, maybe they participated in the study groups and the student, you know, their name didn't come up in those study groups. And when they reported, maybe they did the exit survey and we're looking at, I really struggled in chemistry. I didn't think science was for me anymore and those kind of things. And we can kind of put all those pieces together. This is where the systems analysis comes in to look at all those pieces and how they come together. But like I said, we're very early on how that data collection is going to look. So optimistic probably. Absolutely happy to answer questions via email or me to chat more about this if you are looking at using it in your program.